My name is Tomer Keysar, and I have not made a feature about my grandma's story yet.
What do we usually do for our intro?
We usually start with the show is called Haven't Made It Yet, and we are Indie Not Films.
And then I think I usually say my name.
You
Yannick
say your
Eret.
name. Yeah. Well,
Yannick Eret.
But-
Oh, and then you go.
And then I say Hayden Garrett, which is my name. Today we're talking to Tomer.
Which is something you would usually say.
I would usually say that.
Yeah.
And he makes documentaries. He has a documentary actually coming out in an LA Asian Film Festival. I'm going to repeat that because that's something I would do if
you were to mess up.
I were to mess up.
Which you usually don't.
Which I don't.
But
no.
I'll say this, the documentary is about his grandma filling in some family gaps. He sees himself as kind of like the family historian, which I think is very interesting. Which is something I would say to complement something you had said before, just kind of filling in some details.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be played at an LA Asian music. Oh fuck! I want to say music festival, film festival.
You would just do another take.
It is Coachella this weekend.
Wait. Oh yeah,
today's Monday. Is Coachella still a thing? That's
I think
weekend.
It's done.
Oh,
I think they wrapped it up, just like the Queen.
The Queen wrapped up.
England, they wrapped it up. She's done. No, just kidding. There's another queen. King. There's a king now, and Coachella is still going.
Oh God,
this has been a really good.
Oh God,
we're keeping this, right? Do we need to redo it?
Making it for me is when you're getting enough work. This is a very pragmatic answer, but making it for me is when you're getting enough work to where you can still enjoy everything that you do, and having time to make projects you're passionate about, and not just making things for the sake of making things.
Yeah. And what do you enjoy about all this?
Beyond the creative process, I enjoy the fact that when you make something, it exists and it's going to exist.
Yeah.
Until the apocalypse. So yeah, I mean, it's just going to be there. Like, you are going to die, and then after you die, people can still watch your films and see them online, and they're going to exist. Maybe your film goes in a festival at some point, and then the local paper covers it, and then your name is there for like a second.
It's archiving the world and life as it's developing.
Yeah, my great-great-grandchildren are gonna be like, who is my great-great-grandfather? And then they'll be like, oh, apparently he was some filmmaker. He never really made it, but he was kind of cool.
Well, and you can watch these things, and even if they're not stories about yourself, there's pieces there of you. I love the collaborating process of, it's not just your story, like it's all these people's stories coming together and making this beautiful, whatever chaotic masterpiece that it is. And
that's one of my favorite quotes is, every documentary is fiction, and every narrative film is a documentary. It's
they're time capsules. True. It's going to be so much easier to like find out about people's grandparents in the future. Like, if I want to know anything about my grandpa, I got to dig up some dusty book in the cellar and hope there's some photos in it, and like not know what the context is. But people in the future is gonna like Google their grandpa, and like there's everything.
What was my grandpa's Instagram like? Yeah.
That's right. Oh no, I don't even want to think about that. I don't want my great grandchildren to see my Instagram,
your thirst trap posts,
all those butt pics that I send. I mean, they're very tasteful, but at what cost for my grandchildren?
But too much for young eyes.
Too much for great young eyes.
Breaking into the industry is obviously difficult. What I think is very interesting about you, Tomer, is you took the most ballsy, all-in approach by buying the most, or like one of the most top-end cameras as your intro into the film industry, an ARRI Alexa Mini, is that correct?
Yeah.
And have been using that kind of as your on the Instagram page, it literally says ARRI Alexa owner, which I think is kind of brilliant. The whole thing is kind of brilliant. I'm very curious to see how that's been going for you, having that camera as a way to get jobs. So yeah, maybe we can start by you talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a good way to put it. I guess it was ballsy up to this point, being like 3 years ago, was doing documentaries. And I love documentaries. It's my favorite. I love people's stories and capturing them and telling them. And it's just, since I was at NYU, I was crewing at on people's sets, and I was first ACing a lot. And then I came out here and was like, I guess I really like narrative also. I want to get more involved with that. And I decided to just invest all my money in a camera. And yeah, it's gotten me jobs I probably would not have gotten otherwise. And it's, gives you a certain amount of like respect. Like sometimes I'll be talking to people and they have no interest in talking to me, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, and I also have an Alexa Mini, and they're like, oh shit, like you have an Alexa Mini, like I'll Steadicam up for you if you let me use that, and like we can, so it's been like kind of a currency almost. Like people will, like it honestly, I was expecting to make my money back within a year, and from rentals and using it and getting a kit fee, which that has not happened. And I don't think it's just because it's slow. I think it's also because I just don't have enough of a network yet, because I moved here in July.
Yeah.
It's become a currency in the sense that like I might not make the money back yet, but I have people who have used it, so they owe me like some favors, or like I can switch it for their gear when I shoot something, or I have a friend who's used my gear and he crewed on a film for me for free in exchange for the gear. So it's like that, in that sense, it's been really useful. And yeah, I think I'm going to give it another year or so before I like consider maybe selling it, just because it's been great, but it's also been like a big investment that hasn't really paid off yet. So,
well, I mean, it sounds like it's paid off, like you were saying, in like a networking sense at the very least. Because, I mean, I'm getting the sense that you're working a lot for just having moved here. I mean, you did go to a pretty nice school. NYU's pretty renowned, right, for film stuff. But still, like, just you in July, and you've already done quite a couple cool things. So it'll pay itself out maybe in different ways. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, paying something off in 1 year. Oh, I'm not a camera equipment expert, but I feel like that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like the Alexa Mini, if you bought it in 2015, it paid itself off in 3 months. Like it's like nowadays it's still a great camera, and its value hasn't even gone that far down since 2015. Like a used Alexa Mini is not that different from a new Alexa Mini 8 years ago, but it's just that there are so many of them out here. So it's like, why me specifically? It would be great if I got hired to shoot something, but that just hasn't been happening as much as I'd like it to. But the main thing is people like to rent from rental houses. People like to go to one spot, check out all the gear, get everything, and from one place. Which is also why like ShareGrid isn't really an option for me, because people don't like renting. Especially expensive things off of ShareGrid, just because you don't get that guarantee of a rental house. So that's another complicated.
Is there an option to put the Alexa into a rental house? Like, could you loan it out or something?
Yeah, so people do consignments. So you like leave your camera at the rental house, and then you get 60% to 65% of the cut every time they rent it out. The only thing about the Alexa Mini specifically is that rental houses already have plenty of Alexa Minis. It's been around, it's been popular, so they don't have any shortage of Alexa Minis.
Yeah.
So if you get like if you got the Komodo a couple years ago when it first came out, like that'd be a great camera to get and then consign at a rental house. Or the Alexa 35 now, people are consigning with rental houses. But yeah, the Mini just isn't really it's like really perfect if you're shooting a lot, and yeah, because it's a great camera.
Well, it's difficult with camera bodies because of, I mean, anybody that owns an iPhone would know the same thing, where they just make something new every year, every 5 years, and it's tough to keep up with with that industry.
Yeah, definitely.
But they're all solid cameras. Like
Right.
you can, especially the Alexa series, you can keep on going back in time, and like they all have their own certain look. I've only had a couple shoots where I've gotten to play around with it, and even so, I was like the second AC or something, so like I could look at it but not touch. But it's a solid camera.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, yeah, like all cameras now are getting so good. Like if I sold it, I would just get an FX6 because those are great. It's like 6K and it's $6,000, not 6K. Yeah, cameras are getting so good. I would just get an FX6 if you're like starting out. I would get an FX6.
Yeah.
Did you have a camera before the ARRI Alexa?
I used NYU had a bunch of Alexa Mini, so we would use those at on like our projects first for the seniors. But I owned I used a Sony mirrorless system before the Mini. It's quite the jump from Sony mirrorless to Alexa Mini.
Like DSLR to that.
Yeah. I mean, those are great cameras too.
Oh yeah, they're good. It's kind of why I know Yannick, because in college I just bought a drone and I was like, I'll probably get gigs because I have a drone now. And lo and behold, I went up to this Duck TV was this like kind of student led film school thing, and went up to them. Usually you go in and you become a PA for like a couple projects, and then you can work your way up. Everyone's trying to like pseudo act like it's the industry. I went straight in not knowing that was a thing, and I was like applied to be a DP, and on my resume I was like have a drone. And Yannick was one of the creators. He had one of the projects for one of the terms, and he saw that and he was like, I'm interviewing this guy. Like that's cool. And yeah.
And then that was kind of when the drones just came out, and we used it on our project quite a bit. Like the intro had it. Every intro was a drone, and then some segments in the episodes. But the next season, it was like a 4 quarters, or thirds or something like that, where everybody would do new shows. Everybody was using a drone the next season because they saw it and they were like, oh yeah. Like every kind of sense of like storytelling, it all went out the window. Wow. It's just as long as it's from above.
Awesome.
Yeah, but like I get you need the talent to use it. You need the knowledge to understand how it functions. But like there is an appeal to like be the guy with the good toy of like, hey, you come with my expertise plus like the industry standard of ... Yeah. And that, I mean, it's a good business move. I would say for you doing that. And a year, I mean, I don't know the life expectancy for cameras. Like, I mean, I would say 2 or 3 years. Like,
I think the rule of thumb is 4 years for the camera body.
Well, I'm thinking of like just making connections in general in LA and how long that takes.
It's I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's so difficult. And I kind of lucked out too it's going to be a year I've been here in next week. And I just kind of met the right people and I'm kind of in a good place, but that doesn't happen to a lot of people. It sounds like that happened to you though. What brought you to LA, and who were the connections that you made to kind of get you where you are right now?
I was going to go back to Chicago because I love Chicago. It's where I grew up, and there's like enough film. I was doing wedding photography for a guy out there, so I knew I had a certain amount of like money lined up for me in Chicago. I had free rent because my parents were living in Israel for the year, so I was excited. And then my friend Wyatt from NYU was like, I'm going to LA. I need a roommate. I was like, all right, I guess I'll try. Might as well.
Yeah.
I moved here with him. He's also in the film industry. And then a friend of mine, Toby, who grew up in Santa Monica and moved back to Santa Monica and is also a DP. So we worked on a bunch of projects in New York together. I AC'd for him a lot there. Yeah, so it kind of started with that, just knowing those two guys. Yeah, and then I moved here and I was like, all right, I got to start like making shit happen. So I I knew I've done weddings for like 4 years, so I knew that I would have to do weddings right away. So I emailed like 10 wedding photographers and was like, hey, if you need a second shooter, let me know. And one guy responded, and then I shot like 20 weddings for him last fall.
I'm always surprised when people say like, I'm trying to wrap my head around wedding photographer. Like, are there that many weddings happening that you're working like back to back? Or
all the time? It's crazy, especially in the fall. But yeah, I mean, weddings, that's one thing that's great about weddings. Besides for COVID, there are always going to be weddings.
Are you working like 7 or like 5 days, 6 days a week? Or like,
no, that's the thing. It's not that. It's every Saturday there's a wedding.
Oh, okay. Right, because nobody wants to marry over the...
No one's getting married on a Wednesday. Yeah, so...
I'm new to weddings. So.
Yeah, like in...
New concept, yeah.
New idea.
Yeah, so it's pretty much every Saturday, sometimes Sundays, every once in a while Friday. But
I tried in Portland to do some kind of wedding photography and meeting a few people. Most of my experience behind camera was with corporate content creation, whether it be social media or commercial.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I want to make some like extra money from like I could do this and then wedding. And anytime I tried to apply for wedding photography or videography, I'd kind of be like pushed aside because a lot of the people, I don't know if this was just a Portland culture, but a lot of people wanted you to be full on, like, this is what you do. Like, you need to be a wedding photographer. Is that something similar you've been finding in your work?
Like wedding agencies or wedding photographers looking for second photographers?
It would be, I mean, it was, when I knew someone personally doing wedding photography, it would be a friend of a friend, so they didn't really know me, but I'd be like, oh, I know this person and I've done 6 years of camera work. I'd love to help out with wedding. And they'd be like, oh, I mean, I need you on just as a wedding photographer. And I was like, I don't really want to just be a wedding photographer.
Yeah. It's like, it's crazy because there are so many wedding photographers and like a lot of good wedding photographers, a lot of people who just picked up a camera and don't know what they're doing, but there's just so many of them and so many people who have experience shooting weddings. So it is hard if you've never shot a wedding to get your first. I don't even know how did I even, like in Chicago, I just emailed a bunch of people and sent them my stuff. Like I shot some events at some point and he was like, all right, yeah, it's okay. Come along. You just work for really cheap because you haven't done this before. I was like, okay, fine. Because wedding is not like my passion. So it's weird to work for free or cheap to get somewhere where you're making money to do the things you want to do, right? Yeah. Which, I mean, once you do it, it's great because now, like, if I didn't have weddings, I don't know what I literally have no idea what I'd be doing because there's just not enough work for on-set work. So that's been able to fund my personal documentaries that I edit and make and fund all of the passion projects that I work on. And I feel like everyone has their kind of side hustle. And for me, I think weddings are nice because everyone's always in a good mood and everyone looks good. So it's easy. And it's once you work on set, everything else is easy. Like weddings are like 10 hours maybe. And half the time is just everyone having a good time.
There's a lot of like crafty and sitting down doing those 10 hours on like set where, especially in the camera department where you just kind of like, well, I guess you get to sit down if you're playing focus, but like different working conditions.
Yeah, for sure. Totally.
Have you had any kind of disaster weddings that you filmed or?
Well, so interestingly enough, I don't film. I only do stills for weddings.
Stills. Okay.
I don't know. I just started with doing stills and then I got into film and then I never did like wedding video. Okay. I don't know. That's just something. It's just a lot easier. Also, there's a lot to keep track of with wedding video. But any disaster stories? Not on my end. I had one photographer I worked for who lost all of the files. I was the second photographer. He was the primary, and he lost all of his files and mine. But I had a backup because I'm a good second shooter.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he had all my photos. Luckily, I think they were pretty good. So I don't know.
Did they notice or?
I don't think he told them. I don't think he told them.
Yeah, he just gave.
Yeah,
like a good primary shooter.
Here's all my photos.
Yeah. So he was really stressed. But I mean, I've had a groom's sister wear white and then request like a private photo session with me, and I was like, this is not gonna fly. Like, you can't wear white and ask for, like, the bride was really not happy.
I'm new to weddings. Why is that bad?
Oh, the bride wears white, and if you take away from her attention by wearing white, you're like, that's very bad. That's bad. I had a father of the bride during his speech. It was a really long speech. It was a really hot day, and he passed out during his speech. Oh, God. And we had no idea what was going on. We found out later he had a heart attack.
Oh, my
Luckily,
God.
he was fine.
Yeah.
As fine as you can be with a heart attack. But, like, that was crazy.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at him.
No, I mean, it's a crazy situation.
I definitely would have been laughing in this situation. Yeah. I
worse.
See, which is
in person, you would have been laughing.
No, I know. Anytime things like this happen, like my life has been revolved around bits. So I assume someone's playing a bit. So like that's just where my mind goes to.
Good one, Pops. Now get up.
I was like, okay, you can get up now. Say the rest of the speech. And I know I shouldn't be in anywhere in that situation.
I mean, to be fair, it was a really long speech. It had to end somehow.
Okay.
So,
he brought it upon himself.
So did you grow up in Chicago?
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago.
Whereabouts? As if I knew.
In the city. I grew up around Lincoln Park, and I went to school in Hyde Park.
Okay, cool. And where did the film influence come in Chicago?
So I'd always done photography. So I started out doing photography, and then I was like the kid with the camera always in high school and before. Yeah, my mom would always like take pictures of us growing up, obviously, like all moms, but I sort of started getting into photography through her. She'd give me like the disposable camera when we go on trips, and I'd like take the photos, and they were really bad. But then I got like an iPod Touch. I was so into iPod Touches, and I had the first iPod Touch with the camera, like the 0.7 megapixel iPod Touch, and I took photos and just loved that. And then I got a little point and shoot. I don't know how much of a history I should give of this, but I got a little point and shoot, and then it had like a smile feature, which I thought was cool. Like it automatically takes a photo when it identifies that the subject is smiling.
That is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
It was kind of cool, but also like I can't believe that was what I thought was cool at the time. But I mean, it's cool.
Well, that's lame.
It's interesting how you're.
I mean, it is cool.
You're explaining your history through the things that you've like used through the technology that you've used.
Yeah,
it's an interesting way to go about it. Is there influences of you said your mom took a lot of photos, and were there movies that you kind of
really... Well, so I guess really my interest in this is like stems from history, I guess, and like family history, and just I was always interested in people's stories, and in high school I did like an independent study in oral history. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Studs Terkel. Mm-mm. He was an oral historian, which basically just means you interview people for the sake of history, like capturing their stories. He wrote a bunch of books, or made a bunch of books with these people's stories, where he interviewed people and then edited their interview into like a digestible transcript, sort of. And so and he did so many interviews. He did like thousands of interviews with different people. He's also a Chicagoan. But basically, I just thought that was really cool. And then I did a few of my own, and that's what got me into like interviewing people.
A few of your own
a few of my own interviews. Yeah, I interviewed just various. I can't even remember who I interviewed my second grade teacher when I was in high school, and then, which was really cool. I really liked him. And then interviewed man, I don't even remember. A bunch of different people, and then I turned it into like an edited transcript, like he did, like Studs Terkel did, and that was kind of how I got into people's stories in college. And I was also doing photography at the same time, so I did these type things where I take their photo and then have this story combined with it. And then in college, I got into I was like, I'm just going to go to school and study photojournalism. So I actually wasn't in the film department at NYU.
Oh, okay.
Which I need to clarify, because a lot of times people, well, like my friends who were in the film department, like, you can't say you're in the film department at NYU. I'm like, I don't give a shit, man. Like, you're not that cool because you were in the film department at NYU.
I mean, we went to University of Oregon with cinema studies, which was like barely an actual major. It was like more so journalism than it was an actual cinema, like not even film school. You're studying cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's more useful than...
It was like technically part of the English department. I think it just recently became not under the umbrella of the English department.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's kind of what I ended up doing. I didn't want to major in film because my parents are like both PhD and like they're both professors, and it's not that it was going to be a disappointment if I studied film, but it was just like I should just get a bachelor's and like figure it out like what I want to do creatively. But then I sort of ended up doing the independent study program, which is, it's called the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, and you can kind of just major in whatever classes you take is what your major is, basically.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of cool. It was really open. And then I ended up just taking a lot of film classes, ethics and documentary, like theory of film classes. Sounds kind of like what you guys studied. But like my sophomore year, I got really into documentary film. And then that's where the oral history kind of turned into filmmaking. And in school, I just crewed on a bunch of sets and then got into narrative. So it's really just, I love, like, I don't tell people I'm a DP or I'm an AC. I just say I'm a filmmaker. And then
I suppose a good tip is like not narrowing yourself down when you're pitching yourself to people, because then people might be like, oh, he's documentary. I don't want a documentary style in my feature film.
Yeah, exactly.
Smart.
So just before we move on, I wanted to say I'm like I guess I just don't really, I'm very jumbled in my thoughts in general. And I feel like this is one of those times. Like, I wish there was a way for me to be like, how'd you get into film? And I'm just like, oh, I like saw this movie and I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker, but it's just not, it's like not one instance. It's kind of just like how it happened. And I'm kind of happy with how it turned out. I guess.
And it doesn't have to be, I mean, it could be for some where it's like, I saw this movie and it like blew me away and now I'm this. But it's like most of the time it's one thing leads to another and you're like, oh, this is the lifestyle I like. This is, I mean, I tell this time and time again, but like I'm doing art department for the last year or so. And that's not anything throughout my whole childhood I thought I wanted to do, but I'm enjoying it. And like, yes, I'm still part of film, but it was never part of this kind of process. Like we've talked about this, but I want to do documentary and still be behind the camera, the person asking the questions. And this podcast is kind of allowing me to continue on and do that because I love getting to know new people and hearing their stories. And it's cool that you're of that similar mindset. Have you ever seen or heard, I think it's called People of New York, where it's like 60-second little bits of just a random person in New York, and they do, they talk about their life.
Humans of New York?
Humans of New York.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
That guy's really cool. I think he started out just doing photos and text, kind of like what we were just talking about, and then I guess he's doing videos now too. He's still doing it.
I haven't seen it for a couple years, but that was one of like the big jumps because originally, like, I mean, I still want to do like nature docs, like I want to focus on the environment, but like watching Peoples of New York was like, oh, people are pretty cool too.
Yeah,
like I guess I could do that too.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's the other thing, like going back to what influences or like what inspires you to become a filmmaker. It's like there's also certain things that just inspire you to make a certain project. Like there was a documentary that inspired me to make a documentary about a certain thing and got me into documentary, right?
I guess this could be a good time to get into the documentary that you just made, right? And it's doing festivals right now, is that?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on 2 documentaries right now, and they're both personal docs. One's about my grandmother and her life in Korea growing up in like the outskirts of Seoul in 30s and 40s, and then the 50s during the war, and like her life as a poor Korean woman who never went to school, and not like a day, like not even elementary school or anything, and she just had a really unfortunate situation, and then she ended up like becoming just an amazing person. So it's about that's what it's a really short film. It's a 10-minute doc about her life, and basically she never talked about her life to us or my mom even. She came over to the States because she married an American soldier during the war, and she basically never told my mom about anything about her life in Korea. She said it was too embarrassing, and then when she was 93, she just decided to like tell us everything. And it's crazy because even before, we did an interview on the first day of like when she decided to talk to us, and I filmed it, and she told us that she met my grandpa because she was a beautician's assistant, and he walked in and the beautician knew him, and it was like some very strange convoluted story that we've actually heard before. And then the next day she like decided, I guess, to tell us what actually happened, and that was that she was working as like a sex worker basically because she had to, and met him, and then like at some GI bar basically, and then they got married, and she came to the States. So that was just like a really interesting experience to like see her one day tell us the story that she's told 1,000 times about the beautician's assistant or whatever, and then literally the next day make the decision to be like, I'm gonna tell them.
I have a couple questions of first, how long ago was it when she told you? When how old were you?
So this was the summer of 2020. This was the summer of 2020. We visited her, and they don't believe in COVID in Colorado Springs, so that's how that happened. Yeah. And
so you had this idea that, I mean, the story that she's been playing out for the family for most of your life, and then the process of you wanting to do a documentary about it and tell the story. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I didn't know I'm gonna make a documentary. It was like I worked as an assistant editor in Israel for like 6 months, and the editor I worked for is like a really, really good editor, and he's been in the industry for 40 years, and I told him about my grandma's life, and he was like, it sounds like you should like film that, and just so you have it, because he made a film at one point and he incorporated some interview he did with his grandma and whatnot. I was like, all right, yeah, that's good. I'll just film it so I have it, like in case I ever need to, do anything with it. And even just, I just, as a, like, I'm like the family historian or whatever, like I just like having things recorded just so we have it for the family. So that was the initial plan, was just to like record it so I have it. And then after the interview, it's a good question. Like, how do you decide to make a film? Because I didn't decide until like in the fall of this past year. So we did the interview in the summer of 2020, and then she died the following year, which was crazy because like, thank God we were able to, talk to her. And then after she died, I guess within the next couple of months, I started editing the documentary.
Yeah, it's kind of, I was thinking when you said that she'd never told anyone, and then suddenly she decides to tell you guys or you, that's kind of like a shift, a big shift is happening in her, and that's for older people kind of alarming. My dad has this motorcycle he's been working on since he was 16, and the day that he decides to finish it, I'm going to be very wary, because like that's like his little thing that he's been working on, that to keep the crazy away, if you will. And I think your grandma's version of that was probably hiding this thing that she was ashamed of, and when she revealed it, that's lifting a lot of weight from her, and that's kind of a big moment. That must have been kind of jarring for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It's impactful to one being just a really interesting great story that needs to be told. But two, being a family member, and it must have been difficult at times to try to tell this story the best way, because you want to make it for your grandma. You're doing it for her as much as you're doing it for the story.
Yeah. Well, part of it was really nice because she was like, I was filming her and we were doing like B-roll of her making food and whatnot. And she was just so happy that I was filming her. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to be a movie star," like, whatever. And then it was just really fun. And she, her only thing was like, just don't show it until after I pass because.
Oh, wow.
Because, So unfortunately, she didn't get to see the film, obviously. But yeah, so it is interesting when you're making movies about your family. And I mean, the other one I'm working on is even more complicated, actually. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. But
I want to stick to this is the one that it's now next month's playing in a film festival.
Yeah, so it just got I've submitted it to a bunch of different Asian American film festivals, and it got into the LA Asian Film Festival. So it's basically LA Film Festivals is like a small independent festival that started out as like a comedy festival, and then they like added a bunch of categories like horror and whatnot, and then they added Asian. So this is that's where it's screening in May.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big achievement for what you're. I'm only guessing 25.
So that's interesting. I was thinking about that. I was like, are they going to ask me my age on the podcast?
You don't have to.
Because it's like, I've been thinking about that as a freelance filmmaker. You could probably find out if you really wanted to. You could find out somehow. But I was like, maybe I just won't say my age.
You don't have to.
Because it's like...
An actor never tells age. Why should I care?
Exactly. As someone who constantly tries to sell myself as someone who's like the right person for the job, I feel like sometimes age plays a role in that in a way that I don't really agree with, I guess,
Exactly. No, and I see that time and time again, especially here. Like, I mean, I would get more jobs in Portland with people knowing my age, but then they're like, why are you here?
Yeah.
What makes, like, you haven't built the time, you haven't built the effort.
Yeah, it's just makes no sense.
So many, when I did a few PA jobs for commercial gigs here, it was usually gaffers, which is funny for the name because gaffer literally means old man. But like it would be gaffers coming up to me and like telling me what's right. Like they would always, it'd be like, yeah, PAs never know how to talk on walkies anymore. Like, like, do you have a Sharpie? I was like, yeah, I have a Sharpie right here. It's like, well, do you have a pen? And I was like, well, I don't have a pen. It's like, oh, I need a pen. It's like, why'd you ask for a Sharpie? What? He's like, and then he started trying to
write
sell
a memoir right now.
Yeah, he's like, I need a pen and a Sharpie. Like,
how many colors do you have?
He just wanted to see like back in my day, like this is like a PA always had a pen, Sharpie, and
a pager,
hot brick, and a pager. Yeah, but it's just like it was so. And then I found out that he was trying to sell one of his PA courses he was making. He gave me like a business card of like, I've been making this PA course. Like you should probably get into it because it's going to help you out because it looks like you need it. But it's like of course a gaffer telling me all of this, and it's like,
who PA'd like 20 years ago?
He probably never PA'd. He probably like he was from LA, so he probably like knew a guy who knew a guy.
He's seen on set.
Wow.
But it's time and time again where there is an age thing based on experience. Portland is a good example too. I steadily moving up from like I started as an internship with a corporate documentary company, and then 3 months of that got into being a PA to camera assisting and assistant editing, and got to the point around 5 years of work where I was like, I feel comfortable like taking on my own project. I can be a producer, I can be a DP. Like I know the company I was working with, like I knew like the back of my hand. So I was like let me in, coach, kind of thing. Yeah. And what they would end up doing is hiring these people who had like LA experience and like industry experience and like 5 years, 10 years. And it's like, oh, we needed that. And then what would happen, they'd bring these LA people in, and then the LA person wouldn't know what's going on because they weren't involved in the company. They just got in, grabbed a camera. It's like, okay, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, here I am. Like, I've been here. Yeah, I don't have 5 years LA experience, but like, I've been with you all for 5 years. I have 5 years of this company experience. So like,
all you're only 23.
Exactly. And I didn't have the age, and sadly, I mean, not sadly, I moved to LA partly for that reason of like, okay, if all it takes is 5 years LA experience, I can live in LA for 5 years, and then I can just say that I have LA experience, hire me. And that's that. But yeah, age is a weird thing here.
Because it definitely like matters to a certain extent. Like if experience matters, right?
Yeah.
Like, experience matters,
that's
but
the problem. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, if you're 23 and you've been doing stuff for 6 years, or if you're 40 and you just started like 2 years ago, it's like, well,
exactly.
I mean, if you're 40 and you started 2 years ago, you're probably not very good for other reasons. But I mean, no, good for them for.
No, there's always a time to start, but like no, it is a true thing, and I wonder if that's just part of the U.S. culture. I've never worked outside of the U.S. in that regard. There is this kind of ageist thing of like you have to be a certain age to be able to have this role. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, a lot of people who have been working for 30 years, you kind of hinted at this with the gaffer guy, but like a lot of people who've been working for 30 years haven't changed how they work for 30 years. So it's like you can have a great thing, a great product that, is made by some young guy who knows what's going on nowadays and how to make stuff, or you can have something that looks like it was shot in the 90s, which is cool in its own way. But I mean,
and I think there's a greatness and adaptability of like a young person coming in doesn't have this like step-by-step procedure process that they've been doing for 20 years. Like they might in 20 years from now, but right now it's like, here's a project, you got to do it. And like, yes, it might be like figuring it out, but a lot of really good projects come from having the challenge of, oh, how are we going to do this? And then finding creative ways to figure this out. I think you tend to get more of that. I mean, we're seeing that in some of like the Oscar nominated films. I would say like Everything Everywhere All at Once. A lot of people were very young in that project, and that you could see it from the movie. Like the movie had like ideas that someone in their 60s just cannot comprehend.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. So do you have a date when the
I don't know exactly how organized they are. They were like, we'll let you know soon because we're securing theaters and stuff. But I mean, yeah, I don't know the exact date.
Well, we'll keep in touch, and we'll be sure to put it on a post about it when it comes out. Cool. And this will be kind of like a little complimentary thing of that. I want to talk about the other documentary that you're making.
What is the title of the grandma one, just so people?
The grandma one is called Grandma Sings Arirang. So Arirang is a song. It's a Korean song. It's a folk song. It's like the most famous Korean folk song. It's like the film starts out with her talking about how she, always wanted to be a singer, and how her mom was like, "You're not gonna be a singer. You're just not gonna be a singer." And that was kind of like just like the first example of how controlled her life was from the beginning. And then basically, spoiler alert, the film ends with her singing this song as, a 93-year-old. And so that's what the film's called. And that's what it's framed around.
That's so connected to the story too. That's a beautiful title. I'm excited to see it. And I'm glad that we can share it, and hopefully we can get other people to witness it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's like, it's 10 minutes, so I'm interested to see what films they put alongside it also.
Yeah.
At the festival.
Yeah. What's this other doc you've been making?
So the other one, so this one is like definitely the most intense project I've ever worked on. I've been working on it for 2.5 years ago, basically. And basically, this documentary is also a family documentary. It's about my family's experience with losing our brother in 1998 and like how his death continues to affect our family today. And so it follows my parents who like he basically died in a crib at a daycare.
Yeah.
The crib was a portable crib, so it was designed to fold to carry places, and he was rocking on the rails of the crib, and then it folded onto his neck and strangled him.
Oh my God.
So he passed away at 16 months, and then my parents were like, well, accidents happen. You know, obviously this is horrendous, but
the pain carries on.
But then a week later, they found out that the crib was recalled, and the daycare wasn't notified of the recall, and like there were all these issues with the whole children's product safety system. So they started a nonprofit to raise awareness about these issues and make sure that recalled products aren't still out there, and making sure products are safe, because children's products don't have to be tested at all. Like you can just make a product and it doesn't have to be tested for anything. While all this was going on, my brother and I was born the year after he passed away. So my other brother was 5 years old when the baby passed away. So the other part of the film is about my relationship with my other brother and how Danny's death affected our relationship. And so that was definitely like the most intense part of my filmmaking career and my life, was like talking to Eli, my older brother, about things that we never talked about on camera.
And you're bringing yourself into it, which is like, of course, everybody like who's making a film, they tend to sprinkle themselves into it, but you're actually in the project.
There's a camera on me during the interview with my brother, and it's very like tense the whole time, because we never talked about it before, and he's telling me things that I, never thought and explained a lot about our relationship. It's just amazing that this film happens to coincide with when he is starting to ask these questions about, because it's not like all of it is subconscious, like how his death affected our relationship and our childhood trauma. But he's just now starting to like think about it and realize things, and it's coinciding with when I'm making this film. So it was just such a special moment to be able to talk about that with him, and then sit with it for a year editing it. And because, we did the interview, and that was like things I'd never heard before, and really a lot to take in and really special. And then I edited it for a year and got to like think about every single thing that we said to each other.
And you watch it 1,000 times.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would show him a cut of the film, and he'd be like, well, this doesn't, why is that there? Because that's not really what I meant. And I'd be like, oh, like now I understand that part even more, because like the way I interpreted it was how I put it in the film, but now it's like different. So that was a whole other experience, which was amazing. And I think, and finally, I think I'm going to be done with it next week. So,
wow.
So that's, but it has been so special. I mean,
I mean, I assume that your relationship has kind of changed since the process of making this, you and your brother, just because, I mean, you were talking about things you've never really opened up to about, and like that could definitely affect your relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely changed because we talked about these things. We're just also talking more in general. Mm-hmm. So we got to hang out a bunch over this past couple of years, and it's been really interesting, like getting to know him, because I just didn't really know him growing up. So which I think is kind of common. I mean, among like complicated family dynamics is not like a rare thing, which I think is why the film is kind of, even though not everyone lost, a brother, it's like kind of a relatable situation in terms of.
Does he live in LA as well? Or?
He actually just moved out of LA. He moved back home to Chicago for a little bit.
Where do you think is there a title for this film?
The title is called, it's called Always Danny.
Always Danny.
Always Danny, yeah.
And is that going to be kind of film festival out there?
Yeah, that one is, it's kind of like my main film that is like, obviously it's important to me, but also I feel like it's really important for other people to see it. So I'm gonna try to. It's also just a weird length, which is tough for a festival. It's 35 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So it's not really a short. It's not a feature. So hopefully it'll find a home for in festivals. Yeah.
I haven't done. I mean, Yannick's done a bit of the festival hunting. I've never been in that experience. I tend to be a little bit too antsy. Like I make a project and whether it be months or years that I work on it, it's like, great, I'm done. And then I just post it on YouTube. And like, I know, like, I mean, the instant you post it anywhere, it's like, you can't have it in festivals because the whole appeal with festivals is they want to be the first one playing.
And I don't think they're very thorough about it, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, you're all right.
But I mean, I don't know. I just as long as I can get things out there, like, I mean, in the documentaries, I can relate a little bit with doing documentaries about family members. My mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It's almost been about 8 or 9 years ago. And I did a documentary that ended up playing at a Parkinson's World Summit in Kyoto about her experience. And like she's young onset Parkinson's, which is mostly people with Parkinson's, they get diagnosed around late 70s to 80s, and like it's hard to distinguish what is Parkinson's and what is just old age. So she's an interesting case for science because you can actually see what is Parkinson's that is affecting her, and she's built this whole community around people with Parkinson's, and just to have an outlet with people to talk to. And her best friends are people with Parkinson's, and they hang out, watch movies, and just have a good time together. But I understand the difficulty of navigating the process of, this is a family member, and no matter whatever complication you have with your family, it's usually you're trying your best to tell the story, but at the same time, they live somewhere in your life. And so navigating between the two of like, what story do I tell, as well as I want to make sure that this is good for my mom. I want to make sure that this is something that my grandma can watch, and she would appreciate it. And I appreciate that the stuff that you've been making has been so closely connected with family. That's a lot of my, even the narrative stuff that I want to do always is going to be around family. So it's cool to have that element of film. And this is almost you just trying to like comprehend this whole process. Like it almost sounds like a therapeutic like thing of like, as you're editing, you're just trying to figure out what you think about all this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think that's what all art to some degree is, just trying to figure out how to process something, or just putting that energy into something, you know. At least it has been for me. If I'm going through something emotional, and it'll happen accidentally sometimes. I did also at Oregon, I did a web series that was unfortunately all about my parents and kind of their thing without me even noticing it. Like I had literally cast all the characters of my like high school growing up, part of my high school growing up, like everybody that was in my life there and everything that had happened. And I didn't realize it later until I showed it to them, and kind of off of their reaction perhaps, and I realized I was expecting something subconsciously because I'd put things in there that I wanted them to see, and at the time I was very upset that I had let it leak in that much. But yeah, I think it's always kind of figure out what it all is.
But at the end of the day, kind of going with my whole notion of like just wanting to put it out on YouTube is like, allowing yourself to share that story. Like a lot of us, part of the reason I went into film is I find it very difficult in other mediums to express myself. And I, being a middle child, I grew up with an older sister that could do the yes and improv. Like she was the theater mastermind and everybody wanted to hang out with her in parties. And then I had the younger brother who just didn't even need to think about being a character. Like he is truly himself 100% of the time, all the time. And then there's me where I'm like, I don't even know how to ask this person how their day is going. Like, or just all these, like, anything when it comes to communication on the spot has been pretty difficult for me. But with film, I can control how I want to tell the story, when I want to tell the story, and how long I want to take to like tell the story in the best way possible. Yeah. And it's allowed myself, I mean, even with this, like it's allowed myself to like, what story do I want to tell? And I can soak it in. And then when I'm ready, I put it out and let people see, this is the closest I was trying to say about this specific story. And it sounds like you have somewhat of that same appeal of you just want to tell these stories in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that sounds like a special project, the one about your mom. Is it available anywhere?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. I can send you a message of it. A lot of people tend to see this process as a very difficult thing to get into of filming and what story do I tell and everything. So anybody that wants to get into a documentary or just tell a story about a family member or like something that they find interesting, are there any tips that you can think of to get them into getting into that creative process, or what they need to do to make it happen?
Well, I'm going to start by just saying, if you're going to make a film, get a microphone.
Yeah.
Get a good microphone. Like, make sure that the audio sounds good, especially with documentaries. People just like, I'm just going to film it so I have it. And then they're like, what mic do you use? They're like, well, I think there's one on the camera. It's like, no, I think we need to, like, otherwise it's just not going to be usable. Like, the whole thing of like, if the audio sucks, but the camera or the video is good, like it's going to suck. But if the audio is good, yeah, it's really true. Like, it doesn't matter what it looks like, as long as we can hear, because the emotion's from the words, like, usually.
And that, I mean, that's, did you see there's a No Film School YouTube video where they actually do a test on having the best camera, shitty audio, and then vice versa. And then they had just, I think a study of 100 just random people on the street watch it. And then they did reviews. Everybody loved like the audio. Like the audio was the thing that brought them into the film. And people didn't really care too much about like the shiny aspect. Like just as long as like the audio was clean, that everyone was down for that.
For sure. Actually, I'm going to give you a less technical answer as well.
Narrow down the question of like what motivates you to tell these stories.
I mean, the family stories. The motivation is there because like, family's always been very important to me. My dad's family is Israeli, Yemenite, Jews, very family oriented. My mom is Korean, American, non-Jews, also family oriented. So I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's at some point it's like I don't even have a choice. It's like I'm already doing it. I gotta do it. There are definitely times where I was like, fuck, this is gonna be just a terrible film. And then I just like kind of was like, well, I gotta do it. So I just kept doing it, and then it got better, and I'm like really happy that I stuck with it. But yeah, it is hard, especially with documentaries, because I started out with the Danny documentary just interviewing a bunch of people. I interviewed the director of the nonprofit. I interviewed the head of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the chairman, which is a government agency that regulates the children's products. I interviewed the woman who wrote the book about children's product safety after Danny died. I interviewed a woman who is the spokesperson for the Juvenile Products Manufacturing Association. I didn't use any of that at all. None of it. But it definitely helped me realize what I want the film to be, because I did all those interviews and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I have so much material and it's really interesting. And then I showed it to people and they're like, this isn't that interesting. Like, I mean, I feel like what's interesting is, you know, the story within your family and, you know, everything that's going on with that. And then the logistics of what's wrong with the children's product safety system is like definitely useful, but not like, that's not what this film is. I'm not the one. I'm in a position where I can make a film about my family. But yeah, I mean, part of it, answering your original question, is like to just it's so fucking cheesy. Just get started on whatever. Well, I mean, do the first interview. But once you do the first interview, you'll get to think about what, like, you'll get to see the interview. You'll be like, okay, what from this is interesting and worth pursuing more? Because it's really hard with documentaries a lot of people say you should do a lot of pre-production before you start. And that's true. But part of the pre-production is doing things like interviewing people that you might not even use. Like, you don't need to hire a whole crew you don't need to spend $30,000 to do a bunch of preliminary interviews. You just do it, you just do it yourself. You don't need to rely on other people.
Mm-hmm. You craft the story as you're making it. That's why I love, I've talked to a few documentarians that, like, that's why they do it. Like, with narrative, you have to kind of like sculpt this masterpiece of a story and make sure that everyone knows exactly what it's going to be when you actually go into production. But like, documentaries twist and turn and like constantly go back and forth, and you're just trying to make sense of it all as it's happening all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's what is appealing for me is like, I get to figure it out as the audience is figuring it out.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the movie Tickled?
No. I haven't. No.
That's a good example of that. It started out as just a documentary on like this one person who had a weird encounter with like a tickle fetish person. Like, like being like, the person's thing was to get tied down and get tickled. And they just thought it was kind of funny, kind of weird. And then literally, as you can kind of see them do the first interview and kind of laugh about it, and as that's developing, the whole thing takes an entire turn when they find out that there's like a ring of tickle people, and there's like really big names in it, and they start getting threats from like big politicians, and there's like scenes with them, they're getting like chased down by politicians, and they start to get censored, and this whole thing started as almost like a BuzzFeed level comedy video on like this tickle fetish, and as they're learning about the thing, it's changing.
Wow.
But I think that like your bit of advice in there is I mean, yes, just do it, but I think a valuable lesson for all of us, which is something that you learned, is you found your story through the process of doing it, and like you found all the stuff that like, oh, people don't actually need this, but you wouldn't have known until you actually started going through those interviews.
It's never gonna be the film you were expecting to. You're like going into it making.
Yeah.
Never. And like, it's like that example you gave. The only issue with those kinds of films is, well, the thing about documentaries is that you shouldn't expect that every film you start is gonna be made, because there's just a lot of something. It might just not happen. Like you're like, oh, these people are doing this crazy thing. I'm gonna document it, and then we'll see what happens. And then maybe just nothing happened. And that's okay to like just film something and then never use it. Like, that's totally fine. And then other times something will happen and they stick with it for years. But the only issue with that is that like that while that is a great film, that just like takes so much time and money to make. That kind of film where you keep following them, and those are like the best documentaries. But it just
the rabbit hole.
It takes so long, and those are just really, really tough. So if you're able to do that, I mean, that's great. But it's just hard to just don't expect your film to turn into something like that. But those are those are great. So that's just a tough,
yeah. I guess so. We have two questions for you, which would be, where do you want yourself in 5-10 years? Where do you want to be?
What I've realized is that even though I call myself a filmmaker, I definitely want to get more into specifically DPing narrative things. And I just, I think I told you guys this, but like about a month or two ago, I DP'd my first like feature almost.
Yeah.
It's almost a feature, and that was just like the best experience. Like it was pretty low budget, so it was a little tough, but I just loved like the energy and everything. And it just like felt like I felt at home. I want to do more of that within the next 5 years. And when you work on low budget things, you end up doing a lot of different roles. Like I ended up basically ADing and producing and sometimes production designing and things. So it was tough, but like I can't wait until but even that I enjoyed. So it's like, that's why I call myself a filmmaker, I guess, because
you're doing so many aspects.
Yeah, but even that I enjoyed. I'd rather not. I'd rather have someone who's like killing it on PD and someone who's killing it as AD. So I'm excited to get to that point. Hopefully in 5 years, I'll get to that point where I'm DPing stuff with like awesome people.
Yeah.
I mean, the people were awesome on this too, but there just weren't enough people.
And the cool thing is like, as you grow, these people grow that you want to work with. So like there's a high chance that like you just keep on navigating in that realm, and then you're going to be working with the people that are navigating in certain places too. And then it's just like, I mean, it's so cool to be able to like kind of craft friendships now, and who knows what happens in 5-10 years, and you're still probably working with the same people you worked 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I like this podcast because usually people come on podcasts once they're like, they know what they're talking about, but we're just kind of like, we haven't made it yet. So
did you get that?
Cool.
All I heard was, I like this podcast.
No, I was saying like, it's cool because like, I feel like so official. Like I am saying this and this is what you should do. I don't fucking know. Like
I mean, then that's the case. I think, like, I honestly think like the truest nature of people that have made it is thinking that they don't, like thinking that they know, when really, like, I don't really think any of us actually fucking know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But they have, there's no making it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, when will you make it? Like, when is making it? Like,
right.
I feel like there's at various points you like think maybe you made it or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's you've actually tapped into our marketing strategy, which is getting people before they're famous, so that then when they are famous, we can send them the podcast in about 10 years, which is...
This is a very long-term game.
Yeah. Oh,
I like it.
We're going to have a huge viewership spike.
10 years from now?
10 years.
Great.
But the accompanying question is, and I mean, you as a family historian would know the value of capturing a moment in time more than anybody, is if we're looking at this podcast like a time capsule, and we will send it to you in 10 years. If you want to record yourself a message for you in 10 years, it can be about whatever you want it to be, but just talking to yourself, this is your time to do that.
All right. Hopefully I don't get to the point where I'm not enjoying this, because the whole point is like to, like how I felt when I was DPing that film was like, it felt so rewarding and special, and everything I did was during those weeks was for the film, and it took a lot of time, but it felt like right. So hopefully I don't get to a point where I'm like doing things just because I can, or doing things without like actually feeling like it's what I'm supposed to be doing. So in 10 years, if I'm begrudgingly shooting something that's really sick, but I don't think it's cool, that would suck. So don't do that, future Tomer. Hopefully you're still friends with Yannick and Hayden. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't say like, you love this. It's just like, make sure you still love it. You know, it's like in 10 years, if I don't love it anymore, just do something else. Like, you can just do something else. Mm-hmm. Even if it's adjacent to film, like I could just hopefully I could just figure out something else to do. But yeah, so I think making sure you still love it.
I think that distinction would also be similar to what I would say, which is don't be so stubborn about it. Like,
yeah,
you want to do something now, but if something else is really calling your name, explore that.
Right. Exactly.
And you can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any final thoughts?
This was fun. I like podcasts.
Yeah.
How did I do? Is it okay?
I thought so.
Yeah. We got some good stuff.
Okay.
Got some juicy
Useful,
content.
juicy content.
It was lovely to have you on, Tomer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I love
Tomer.
everything. I love everything to do with family. I think anything that I'm going to do, any project I make, whether it's going to be about an animal in the middle of nowhere, it's going to have some element to do with family, because that's what has been so impactful into my development as a filmmaker. And it's nice to talk to somebody who has that same concept in mind. I think you have something similar, where all of your projects have something to do about your relationships, about your family, your friends. And it's cool how passionate he is. I mean, he's made now 2 documentaries about his family that are like very interesting stories. And
just I like how personal he's willing to make it and get really uncomfortable with it. That's just kind of what I do with my projects as well. And at the end of the day, that's kind of where the interesting stuff is. If you're like a little bit on edge about making it, you're probably onto something good.
Yeah. And it's nice to see. I mean, he is now he came to LA around the same time I did, so he's about maybe 9 to 10 months here, and how successful he's already been. It's interesting listening in to him and being like, yeah, I'm just not meeting enough people yet, or like I
shot his first feature.
Yeah, I know. He's already shot a feature, and he's already gotten gigs with people renting out his camera, getting him on jobs, and like that's really successful for a year in LA. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah, when he was saying that he hadn't paid off his camera yet, I was like, and that it's only been a year. It's like, holy shit, like that's hell of a goal. Like in a year, I mean, like I said, I don't know that much about it, but like in a year, paying, that's a huge expense, that camera. I don't know the specifics, but thousands, like that's a lot of money. Yeah. He has a high goals for himself.
But he's a driven person, and I believe like if that goal still exists of paying off that camera, I can see that within the next year or two.
Yeah.
And it would be great now. Then he would just have an ARRI camera at his fingertips, already paid for from all of his accomplishments. So.
Yeah, I also like that he got a little bit into the technical stuff. His little a thing about people should start asking for what mic you used on your short film versus what camera. I think that's very, very telling of his experience.
Did you think of in the back of your mind, were you thinking about the podcast?
Yeah. Well, the podcast too, because we had a lot of technical issues, and I was like, he was like eyeing us. I was like, oh, don't look at us. No. But no, also just looking at all the projects that I've made where the sound has been just ass.
It is true though. Like people, I mean, podcast alone is an audio element, and like the fact that, I mean, I appreciate everybody listening, watching to this because we did start with just using our phone audios, but like, I mean, that's the advice that I'd give is like use whatever you got.
Yeah.
And it means, I mean, you can use a camera, and then as long as a mic is close by, you're going to get pretty good audio. Don't use the camera's audio, because that's not going to be close to your subject, most likely. But use a camera, use a phone audio, and then put those together, and then you got a movie.
Yeah.
With, other things.
Yeah, using a good mic shouldn't be a deterrent, just as much as the false requirement that you need a good camera shouldn't be a deterrent to just start. I mean, only ways up. Start rough. we're learning that one, all right?
But sound is not our forte, and that's why we made a podcast.
Yep. Just, hey, we're working on our weaknesses.
Yep.
Listening, also not one of mine. So
only getting better.
Are. Yeah.
Did you say something?
What was you saying?
Okay.
Hey, and we're getting better at that.
Let me take it. Okay.
No,
just
stop.
So you know.
Too much.
Yeah.
But also, I was just noticing how much of how much of a crew and do-it-yourself, hands-on kind of guy he is, because every time there was a sound issue, he would look at the sound recorder and you know, because he's done so many interviews, like he was saying, he knows what it's like to be on that side of it. And also when we were breaking down afterwards, he was like helping coil cables and like unplugging things and like packing up, like while we were talking, like he was just in his instinct.
Yeah, it was autopilot. It was autopilot. We didn't ask him. He just went on and just started doing it.